The Aurora's edge shuddered violently as it pierced Thalassa IV's tenuous atmosphere. Its fusion reactor whine drowned out by the roar of supercooled wind. Whipping across the shuttle's reinforced hull, inside the cockpit, Lieutenant Mira, Hawk's breath steamed in short puffs against the transparent visor of her exosuit helmet. She traced the mountain of ice and snow rolling beneath them, a vast, glittering expanse that gleamed like shattered diamonds in the pale, distant sun. To the uninitiated, it looked like paradise, an invitation to carve perfect tracks down crystalline slopes. Hawk, however, knew the Academy's simulations weren't meant for joyrides. Each glistening ridge could hide a lethal crevasse. Every frozen plateau could collapse under the weight of a single misstep. Behind her, the 15 cadets buzzed with anticipation. Cadet Rowan Price, lanky and perpetually restless, tapped his ski pole against the cockpit bulkhead, sending vibrations through the shuttle's frame. 20 minutes till touchdown, he announced with a grin that suggested he'd already mapped out the most exhilarating descent. Around him, his classmates checked their gear-magnetized poles calibrated and locked. Exosuits sealed and charged, integrated heaters set to maximum chill. Cadet Serena Yu, the team's unofficial medic, ran diagnostic scans on her biothermal gel pack, the readouts flickering amber as the pack's microcapsules primed for rapid deployment. Commander Tsora Drake stood at the rear, arms folded beneath her insulated coat. Her expression was unreadable behind the mirrored visor of her helmet, but Hawk could almost feel the quiet calculation in her posture. Drake was the Academy's ace instructor, known for pushing cadets to the brink and beyond, then drawing them back from the edges of their limits. "Remember," she intoned, her voice a calm counterpoint to the cadets' restless energy. "Thalassa 4 is unforgiving. You'll negotiate an active distress beacon, extract a stranded cadet, and return to the Aurora's edge within 48 hours. This is no leisurely ski trip. Your survival depends on precision, teamwork, and discipline." A hush fell. The shuttle's sensors confirmed proximity to ground. Frost crystals skittered across the viewport as the craft's downward thrusters engaged. Hawk guided the controls, angling their descent toward a sprawling ice field ringed by towering cliffs. It was flat enough for a safe landing, yet jagged enough to test every ounce of the cadet's field craft. On her comm, the synthetic voice of the shuttle's AI intoned. Landing sequence initiated. Estimated touchdown in 10 seconds. Price let out a whoop of excitement. "Finally, let's see if those gravity boots live up to the hype." He jabbed a finger at the panel above his head, as if triggering a spring-loaded ramp. In truth, the exosuits automatically adapted to local gravity and topography, but theatrics were part of the Thalassa 4 ritual. The shuttle rattled as its landing struts bit into ice that felt harder than diamond. Tiny fissures spiderwebbed outward, sending sparks of bluish light dancing across the snow. Hawk touched down smoothly, her reclining seat thrusting forward on dampers. The ambient temperature plunged instantly. Within moments, the cockpit windows frosted over, and the interior heaters whined in protest. "Lock down gear," Drake commanded, "and secure all loose items. We move in 5. The cadets snapped into action, ejecting from their seats and forming a tight semicircle round Drake at the airlock. Hawk followed, feeling the hiss of decompression as the bulkhead door slid open. A blast of frigid air tagged her exosuit sensors with a -76 Celsius reading. The world outside was blindingly white, the horizon blurred by swirling ice crystals. Cadets fanned out, their magnetized boots anchoring into the slick surface. Hawk paused to admire the vista field of gently rolling snow, broken by jagged spires that thrust toward the sky like skeletal fingers. Beyond, the landing zone dropped into a ravine, a perfect natural chasm carved by ancient glaciers. It would serve as their first challenge, a rapid descent to the simulated distress site. Price bounded forward. "Race you to the edge," he challenged, voice echoing off the ice walls. Hawk shook her head with a dry smile. He had the strength and agility of a Deathworlder's bloodline descended from planets where survival demanded peak physical prowess, but this was no playground. She retrieved her calm handheld. "All teams, report status. Thermal shields on tight, exosuit heaters at nominal output." One by one, voices crackled in affirmation. Serena's calm tone carried a note of wry amusement. Heaters at 60% running warm enough to fry but not boil. Cadet Li Wei, their communications specialist, tapped his shoulder mount. Sensors online. No odd electromagnetic readings yet. Through the swirling snow, Hawk thought she saw movement, nothing more than a flicker at the corner of her vision. The Academy liked to throw surprises into the mix. Drake nodded and activated her wrist console. A holographic map projected between her palms, indexing their objective, a coded distress beacon some 8 kilometers southwest, buried beneath a collapsed ice arch. The map flipped to tactical overlay, crevasse danger zones, slope tension ratings, prime descent routes. Hawk drank it in. Every blue and red highlight signified potential hazard, yet the most dangerous threat was always human error. Put on your ski mount arrays, Drake instructed. Step light. Use the poles for probing. Never assume a slope is stable until you've tested it. She turned to Hawk. Lieutenant, you'll lead the first squad. Cadets Price, you, and Vargas. With you, break into 3-minute intervals to test ice integrity as you descend. Any anomaly, and you pull back immediately. Hawk felt her pulse quicken, a mixture of pride and adrenaline. This was her first command in the field. 2 years of holo lectures, UNSC simulations, theoretical drills, all converged into this moment. She squared her shoulders, exosuit servos humming as they adjusted to her posture. Understood, she replied. The ramp hissed open. Outside, the frozen wind slapped their faces like a slap from a banshee. Hawk raised her poles and took the first measured step onto the slope. Price followed, crouched like a skier coiled for launch, while you and Vargas fanned out to scan for hidden dangers. Behind them, the remaining cadets readied drones and rations at the shuttle's flank. As they slid into motion, one cautious step at a time, the world seemed to hold its breath. Each crunch of snow underfoot, each whine of the exosuit servos, each muffled gust of wind, combined into a symphony of tension. Hawk's visor HUD measured slope angles, temperature gradients, and microfractures in the ice. Down below, the ravine yawned, promising both the thrill of speed and the terror of a fatal plunge. She exhaled, centering herself. This was the Academy's ultimate test, facing a Deathworld's raw hostility with nothing but training, equipment, and comrades. And as the first squad began their descent, Hawk couldn't help but feel a spark of exhilaration. Thalassophore was no leisurely ski trip, but if they could master it, they would prove worthy of the Academy's highest honor. The descent into peril had begun. The icy dawn of Thalassa the Fourth broke with a pale violet glow, the first light refracting through suspended boron crystals like a trillion tiny prisms. From their vantage point atop a ridge, the cadets of the Aurora's Edge Survey Squad watched the swirl of mist rising from an ancient, glacial lake below. It was serene, deceptively so. Commander Tsora Drake's voice crackled over the comm link, sharp and commanding. Cadets, attention. We have an active distress beacon at Grid 17 Delta. Cadet Jensen's signal is stable but power-starved. That beacon has 3 hours before its backup fails. Your mission, locate Jensen, stabilize him, and prepare for extraction. Lieutenant Mira Hawk exhaled, her breath fogging the interior of her visor. 12 hours ago, this had been a pure exercise in survival skills. Now, it was a race against time and against Thalassa IV's lethal environment. Team Alpha, Drake, continued. Price, you, Vargas, with Hawk at the lead. Team Bravo will secure the rear and maintain drone surveillance. The rest of the squad acknowledged in unison, their exosuit servos whining softly as they activated low-profile modes. Hawk swept her gaze over her squadmates. Rowan Price's lanky frame was already in motion, ski poles tapping out a staccato rhythm on the hardened ice. Cadet Serena Yu adjusted her med sensor cuff, while Cadet Luis Vargas calibrated the magnetic grappling hooks that dangled from his belt. They were ready. Let's move, Hawk ordered. They descended the ridge in single file, each step measured to avoid hidden sinkholes. The ridge's edge gave way to a frozen slope that plunged nearly 200 meters into a cavernous expanse of plateaus and jagged ice spires beneath their feet. The snow was crusted with a veneer of hoarfrost that fractured into fractal patterns. Under their weight, something Drake had warned them to watch for. As Team Alpha picked their way down, Hawk probed the surface with her pole. A hard thud meant solid ice. A hollow tap signaled potential void. 3 paces forward, and the tip broke through a centimeter-thick veneer, revealing a yawning cavity below. Crevasse. Hawk whispered, motioning for Price to halt. The lanky cadet crouched low, pressing his own pole into the opening, sparks dancing as metal met ice. He looked up, at least half a meter wide, and deep enough to disappear a person. Good catch, Hawk praised. Use the lateral traverse 5 meters left. Ground should be tighter there. She paused, then added with a wry grin. Try not to ski off into oblivion. Price. Price flashed a thumbs up, voice playful, but eyes serious. No promises, Lieutenant. They skirted the crevice's edge, heartbeats synchronizing through the exosuit's internal biofeedback. Below them stretched the target zone, a collapsed ice arch spanning a narrow valley. Embedded in the rubble was the distress beacon's faint orange glow. Jensen lay somewhere beyond, his vitals likely plummeting with each passing minute. Halfway down, the comms crackled. Alpha, this is Bravo. Sensors are picking electromagnetic spikes. Possible sublatial vents magnetic anomalies could fry. Your HUD. Recommend pulse shielding. Copy that, Hawk replied. She tapped her helmet twice, triggering the suit's impulse dampeners. The visor's iridescent sheen shifted to a muted gray functional, but with less clarity. We'll proceed with caution. They reached the valley floor and crouched behind a ridge of shattered ice. Serena, you knelt, pulling out a volumetric scanner. Its pale green sweep illuminated the cavern in ghostly outlines. Jensen's not. Far about 100 meters northeast. But there's a distortion here. She pointed to a bulge in the scan, like a tumorous growth of ice. Vargas frowned. Sub-zero stalactite-sized spikes hanging from the cavern roof. They'll break loose under vibration. He tested the ground with a short blast from his exosuit's microthrusters. A low rumble echoed through the chamber. We've got 30 seconds before collapse. We move now. Hawk gave the signal. They rose and dashed across the snow-packed floor, poles planted firmly. The ceiling groaned. Serena sprinted ahead, pulling Jensen's biobeacon from her pack. He's right here. The med pack's lights blinked red critical dangerously low. Price dropped his pack. I've got thermal blankets. He yanked out an insulated cover, wrapping it around the prostrate cadet. Vargas crouched to check Jensen's exosuit. Suit integrity at 70%. Cold shock set in. We need the gel packs now. Serena extracted the gel vials, slapping them onto Jensen's wrists and ankles. The gel diffused instantly, minute-heating filaments weaving through the fabric. Jensen's chest rose in a shallow gasp, then steadied into deeper, stronger breaths. The beeping biometer shifted from red to amber. Hawk and Price stacked emergency rations and a portable heat core around Jensen, while Vargas activated a local warming beacon to attract the medical drone. The cavern's ice floor trembled, shards rattling like marbles in a bowl. Extraction in 3 minutes, Hawk announced. We get him to the shuttle before. She was cut off by a thunderous crack. Half a dozen stalactites sheared from the ceiling, plummeting toward the floor. Move, move, Hawk bellowed. She scooped Jensen into her arms, a cringe of pain flickering over his face, and sprinted toward the chamber's entrance. Snow erupted around them, the cavern of fury, of collapsing ice. Serena and Vargas formed a protective bracket, guiding Hawk into a tight corridor that led back toward the ridge. They emerged just as the cavern sealed itself off in a cascade of white. The blast of cold air hit them like a wave, but they didn't. Pause. Price had already erected the collapsible carry sled. Together, they loaded Jensen, capping the sled's canopy as they scrambled onto the slope. All right, Hawk panted. Time to show off our skiing skills. She skidded onto the slope's edge, testing the snow's grip. Form up. One slip and Jensen's back in cryostasis. Team Alpha fanned out in a wedge, sled trailing behind. The slope dropped at a 30-degree angle, death for an unprepared traveler, but for the cadets, it was mission critical. Hawk leaned forward, poles tucked under arm, and pushed off. The world blurred into streaks of white and green as the sled's skids carved grooves in the ice. Behind her, Price and Vargas flanked the sled. Serena clung to its side, monitoring Jensen's vitals. Gravity pulled them downward, but their training kept them upright. At one point, the sled hit a rogue ice lip. It launched into a small jump. For a heartbeat, they were airborne, then slammed back onto the slope. A collective gasp, a brief slam of pain, and they were off again. At last they reached the ridge line where the Aurora's edge waited, its emergency hatch swinging open. Drake stood by, arms folded, expression inscrutable. The drone hovered overhead, ready to escort them in. Hawk skidded to a stop, heart pounding. She placed Jenkins gently inside the shuttle's med bay module. Patient secure. Thermal stabilization complete. The medic drone beeped in acknowledgement and drifted inside to begin its detailed treatment. Drive AYC approached, still as stoic as an ice statue. Then she inclined her head. Excellent work, cadets. You demonstrated rapid assessment, flawless coordination, and adaptive tactics under pressure. Few teams recover a patient from a collapsing cavern in under 15 minutes. Hawk exhaled, a grin breaking through her fatigue. Price leaned in, whispering, "Told you I could handle the big jumps." Serena chuckled as she stripped off her gel-sticky gloves. "Next time, let's see if the Academy will install a hot cocoa dispenser at the top." Drake's little smile flickered through her helmet's visor. "Enjoy your victory," she said quietly, "because Thalassa for has many more lessons to teach, and none of them come with a pause button." As the shuttle's hatch sealed and the engines powered up, the cadets gathered their gear. Adrenaline still thrumming through their veins. They had proved themselves capable, creative, and cohesive. But in the silent expanse of Thalassa IV, the real trial had only just begun. And somewhere, beyond the next ridge, another challenge waited, ready to test their resolve once more. A stillness settled across Thalassa IV's icy plains as the Aurora's edge lifted off, leaving behind the glittering wreckage of their cavernous rescue. Inside the shuttle's cabin, Lieutenant Mira Hawk loosened her helmet, wiping a sheen of frost from the interior visor. Cadet Jensen lay on the med bay stretcher, wrapped in thermal blankets and humming with the steady rhythm of biothermal gel warming his core. For a precious moment, it seemed as though victory was theirs. Then the emergency lights flickered, and the entire cabin convulsed with a high-pitched whine. The shuttle's calm system crackled, spitting fragments of static, and the digital readouts on every panel glowed a warning red. Interference spiking, Cadet Liu Wei reported, voice tense, from her station at the comm console. She pointed at a 3D map of Thalassa IV where a swirling mass of green and violet began to blossom, like a living bruise over the southwestern horizon. Boron storm forming, it's moving faster than projected. Commander Tsora Drake's jaw tightened. Borons are the worst. Each storm carries nanocharged ice crystals that generate electromagnetic pulses. If they breach our shields, every system goes dark. She glanced at Hawk. We're too far from the Academy to call for backup. All we have is that fusion drive and your cadets' discipline. Hawk's pulse quickened. They had already pushed their gear to the limit during the rescue, and now, with a critically injured teammate aboard and a lethal storm barreling straight at them, they faced the deadliest trial yet. She met Drake's gaze with resolve. Understood, Commander. What's our immediate objective? Route 2. Waypoint Delta is cut off, Drake said, pulling up alternate coordinates. We'll have to cross the Chalice Icefall and Notorious Avalanche Zone to skirt the heart of the storm. It's a steeper descent than any of you have attempted, and the path is littered with unstable seracs, but it's our only shot at outrunning the storm and making it to Delta before the beacon goes dark. A hush fell over the cabin. The cadets exchanged nervous glances. The Chalice Icefall was legend among Deathworld veterans, a frozen cascade of crystalline pinnacles that could buckle under their own weight at the slightest provocation. Many who had tried to cross it during training had ended up frozen or lost in crevices. Serena Yu folded her arms, determination hardening her features. Our med drone can keep Jensen stable for another 20 minutes, but after that, we need to be in a safe zone. If that storm hits full force, she let the sentence hang. Unspoken fears etched in her voice. Drake nodded curtly. We depart. In 2. Suit heaters to maximum antifreeze setting. And pulse dampeners online. Everyone double-check your harnesses. Hawk strapped in beside her squad. Price patted the side of the med bay where Jensen lay. "Stay with us, Jensen," he murmured. "We're not leaving you behind." Vargas tightened the straps on his magnetic grappling hooks. Serena ran. The gel pack dispensers threw a dry cycle test. Liu Wei peered at incoming sensor readings. Recalibrating, the shuttle door hissed open onto the frozen wasteland outside. The sky pulsed with green veins of charged particles, the precursor to a full boron storm. It crackled and arched above them like the sky itself was tearing open. Hawk stepped out first. A blast of gale force wind nearly knocked her off her feet. She braced herself, the icy gusts clawing at her exosuit's outer plating. The storm's edge already scattered microscopic ice crystals that ground into the helmet's visor. With each puff of wind, "Pull checks," Hawk called. "Check tension, test tips." The cadets brought their magnetized ski poles down on the compacted snow. Each strike sparked faint teal flashes as the pole's dampeners activated. Satisfied, Hawk led them toward the ridge above the Chalice icefall. From high ground, they surveyed the labyrinth below, a frozen deluge of towering spires and steep gullies, their surfaces polished by centuries of wine-sculpted ice. Sharp shadows cast by the low sun cut through the swirling fog, creating illusions of movement that played tricks on the mind. Drake's voice crackled in their helmets. "Stay in sight of each other. Follow Hawk's signals. Any sign of a Sarek shift, back off immediately." Hawk raised one gloved hand. Price and Vargas mirrored her. Serena and Liu took positions at the rear, watching their 6 o'clock. Together, they edged forward. The first step off the ridge was like plunging into a canyon of crystal. Hawk probed the edge with her left pole. Ice held firm. She signaled them down the slope. Heel first, boot spikes biting into the slick surface. The wind howled, forcing them into a crouch. Every crunch carried on the gusts, echoing off the ice towers like distant thunder. Halfway down, a low rumble vibrated through the ground. Hawk froze, every sense heightening. They peered over a drop-off into a narrow chute illuminated by emerald stormlight. Below lay their path and jagged staircase of ice ledges barely 2 meters wide, plunging 20 stories to the valley floor. "Watch the ledges," Hawk warned. "One slip, and there's no recovery." Price took the lead, moving with the grace of a free skier. He covered each ledge with precise thrusts of his poles, then anchored his boots and motioned them to follow. Hawkins watched, mentally mapping out escape routes should the ice shift. Vargas and Serena maintained a tight perimeter, poles ready to jam into any sliding Sarek. They reached the halfway station, a small alcove where ice had formed a natural overhang. The storm's fury raged above, but here the wind eddied into calmer swirls. Hawk exhaled, checking her suit's integrity. Temperature -80 to C. Battery reserves 38% and dampeners 72%. Physiological readouts of the cadets showed elevated heart rates and cortisol spikes, but no hypothermia. "Push on," she said, flaring her hand signal. "We're halfway through the storm's projected track. After this final descent, storm intensity eases." She plunged off the ledge into the lower chute. Below, the terrain leveled into an ice field streaked with fresh fractures, yet nearly out of reach. The storm's core pulsed with lethal energy. A crackling bolt of emerald lightning arched toward them, striking a distant Sarek with a thunderous boom. The impact sent a wave of ice shards cascading down a hailstorm of lethal projectiles. "Take cover," Hawk barked, yanking Price and Vargas behind a fallen spire. Serena and Liu followed suit, the sled carrying Jensen wedged between 2 ice columns. They braced as chunks of ice rained down, thundering around them. Hawk activated her suit's microforce shield. A faint blue halo shimmered for a heartbeat, deflecting the worst of the debris. The ground trembled as another strike rocked the valley. "Enough," Hawk shouted. She keyed her calm mic. "Drake, this is Alpha Team. We're pinned at the lower chute. Need protective cover to clear the path on the ridge above." Drake responded immediately. "Bravo Team. This is Drake. Provides suppressive ice charges to carve a passage. Incoming in 10 seconds. The distant pop of charged harpoons echoed, detonating in precisely measured blasts that sent controlled avalanches down the flank, burying the storm's projectiles and carving a narrow route. "Move." Hawk led the sprint across the blasted channel. Each step was a scramble as they dodged flying ice shards, but the new passage held firm. Within minutes, they cleared the Chalice Icefall's final barrier and reached a plateau sheltered by a natural ice amphitheater. The wind's roar lessened. The lightning bolts receded to faint glows on the horizon. Hawk dropped to one knee, checking Jensen's vitals, stable but weak. "We made it," she whispered, relief warming her voice. Serena knelt to administer another gel-packed dose. "He's going to pull through," she assured. Price and Vargas secured the sled, and Liu patched them back into navigation channels. Above them, the sky's green veins began to dissipate, the storm core finally barreling past into the uncharted wastes beyond. Yet none of the cadets exhaled fully until the Aurora's Edge's landing lights winked through the swirling fog, signaling their extraction point waypoint Delta, respite. At last, Commander Drake's voice crackled one final time. "Outstanding work, cadets. You navigated the Chalice Icefall under the boron storm's full wrath and kept your injured comrade alive. You've set a new benchmark for the Academy." Hawk stood slowly, pushing frost from her shoulders. She allowed herself a tired smile as her teammates gathered around her. The storm had tested them to their cores, but they had emerged not just survivors, but something stronger, an unbreakable unit forged in ice and lightning. As they boarded the shuttle, Hawk glanced back at the spectral remains of the storm, veins of green fading into the twilight sky. Philosopher still held countless perils, but together, they had learned the greatest lesson of all. In the face of nature's fury, courage and cohesion could carve a path to victory. The shuttle's fusion engines thrummed through the silent void, carrying the cadets of the Aurora's Edge away from the icy crucible of Thalassa 4. The ramp sealed shut, life support systems hummed back to life, and the cabin lights warmed to a soft amber glow. Inside, the cadets shed layers of frost-caked gear, trading exhausted smiles as monitors in the medbay confirmed Cadet Jensen's stable recovery. For a moment, the afterglow of relief eclipsed every other emotion until Commander Sora Drake's voice filled the intercom, crisp and expectant. "Attention, crew. We'll arrive at Galactic Academy Spaceport in approximately 90 minutes. Prepare for debrief and ceremony. Your performance data has already been uploaded to Academy headquarters. Cadets, you have set a record no team has ever completed. The Thalassa for survival run with a wounded comrade and under full storm conditions. Congratulations." A ripple of astonished laughter and incredulous cheers broke out. Hawk leaned back against the bulkhead, closing her eyes. It felt surreal. 16 souls who should have been buried beneath ice were now rocketing home as victors, she thought. Back on every step of the mission, the delicate balance of probing for hidden crevices, the frantic rescue in the collapsing cavern, the heart-pounding descent through the Chalice Icefall, and finally the grove of refuge where they'd waited. Out the boron storm. Each trial had forced them to the brink, but here they were, unbroken. Price, still buzzing with adrenaline, bounded over. "Can you believe it? Full debrief, Academy Gala. Medals, maybe they'll even let us carve our names on the wall of valor." He punched his palm in a mock fist bump. "Lieutenant Hawk, best team leader in galactic history." She cracked an exhausted grin. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still have to survive the Academy's congratulatory luncheons first." Serena Yu emerged from the med bay, sneaking a final glance at Jensen's vitals before locking up. "The unit, he's out cold, but vitals are excellent. Think medical will release him by tomorrow morning." She leaned conspiratorially toward Hawk. "He owes you one." Hawk nodded, shoulders sagging with relief. "We all do." In the shuttle's main cabin, Vargas and Liu Wei reviewed the mission telemetry. Panels displayed color-coded hazard maps, heat signature overlays, and system log timelines. "We'll have to refine the thermal probe algorithm," Liu mused, rotating a holographic display. "The current suite overcompensates in storm electromagnetic fields." He tapped a command. "Sending the data to the Academy's R&D labs. Consider it done," Vargas replied with a grin. "But next time, remind me to bring extra gel packs and maybe a personal hot chocolate dispenser." Laughter echoed down the cabin corridors. Moments like this, when fatigue, elation, and camaraderie blended, were rarer than any boron storm. Hawk lingered in the doorway, watching her cadets joke and tease. In every face, she saw the same fierce pride and quiet wonder. We did it. We survived the Deathworld. Touchdown at the Academy spaceport was anticlimactic compared to the wild descent of Thalassa 4. The Aurora's edge glided along the magnetic rails, decelerating until the shuttle doors parted. Upon exit, the cadets were greeted by a phalanx of Academy brass, the stern-faced Admiral Korv, the ever-imposing Chancellor Aaron Voss, and an honor guard of crusted ice veterans who had once braved Thalassa's wrath themselves. Hawk led her team to the red-lit debrief chamber, where mission logs blinked on the holoscreen. Behind them, gathered on elevated benches, were the families of each cadet, their eyes alight with a mix of fear and pride. Price's younger sister wiped tears from her cheeks. Serena's parents exchanged proud nods. Vargas's distant cousin, decorated war veteran, stood, saluting. Commander Drake's voice resonated through the chamber. "Cadets, you have completed the ultimate Deathworld test. You demonstrated mastery of survival tactics, advanced medical response, and tactical navigation under fire. But more importantly, you upheld the Academy's core tenets: loyalty, courage, and ingenuity. For your actions, you will be honored today and remembered in the annals of galactic history." Applause thundered. The cadets stood, heads high as the holographic emblem of Thalassa for an ice-shattered moon against emerald storm veins projected. Behind the podium, one by one, Admiral Korv handed out insignia, commendation badges etched with the Academy seal and a miniature ice spire, symbolizing the cadets' triumph over the frozen moon. When the ceremony concluded, Chancellor Voss stepped forward, her grave features softening. "You have shown that the human spirit can carve hope out of inhospitable worlds. You reminded us all why the Galactic Academy exists: to prepare individuals to face the unknown with unwavering resolve. On behalf of the Academy and the people of Core Systems, I thank you." The cadets returned to their families in a swirl of photos, embraces, and proud tears. Hawk found herself face to face with Jensen, now awake and flushed with health. He extended a shaky hand. "Thanks for not letting me freeze," he said, voice thick with emotion. Hawk clasped his hand firmly. "You did the hard part, kid. You stayed alive." She saw tears in his eyes and realized how close they'd come to failure and to losing a friend. Later that evening, the Academy's grand rotunda rang with music and laughter. Tables groaned under gourmet spreads so long reserved for admirals and dignitaries. Cadets from every discipline surrounded Hawk's team, eager to hear tales of near-freezing winds and thunderous avalanches. At the center of it all, Hawk sipped a lukewarm drink, watching Price attempt an impromptu demonstration of their sled jump. Much to the crowd's delight, Serena nudged her. "You know," she mused, "I never thought I'd appreciate indoor heating as much as I do right now." Hawk laughed, lifting her glass in a mock toast to teamwork, thermal gel, and the worst ski trip in history. They clinked glasses, the sound bright in the hall's acoustics. In the shadows of the balcony above, Drake observed them, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. She'd pushed them to their limits, and they'd surpassed every expectation. As the festivities swirled around her, Hawk realized the truth of Drake's lessons. The cadets hadn't merely survived a death world, they'd grown stronger, closer, and more capable than they'd ever imagined. The frozen moon had been their crucible, but the real victory lay here, among friends and mentors, in the warmth of shared triumph. And as the night wore on, Hawk allowed herself one final thought. Thalassa 4 would forever be their legend, the ice world they conquered not with brute force, but with unity, skill, and an unyielding spirit that no storm boron or otherwise could ever extinguish.